everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist for Ghostlight, Taylor Shell. Yay!
What's up, everybody?
Well, Taylor, all kinds of great stuff to talk about, but as always, we like to know a little bit about you and your history. How did you get started in music, and particularly on bass?
Well, let's see. I mean, I started playing music when I was little, maybe in first grade or something on piano. You know, then, like many in my generation, I got a copy of Green Day Dookie in about third grade, started playing guitar, and then in fifth grade, I was the second best guitar player at my school, so I was a bass player pretty quick because we wanted to have a band. And then I've been playing ever since. Yeah, through many different groups and times, and through high school, and then went and studied in Boston at Berkeley School of Music for college, and then been on the road kind of ever since.
Gotcha. Now, with Ghostlight, this pretty much like indie jam, rockish kind of. The genres get a little hard to pin down.
Totally.
And you're coming to it with a Berkeley background, which I think is probably a lot more jazzy in a lot of ways.
Sure. Yeah, well, certainly there's an intellectualizing that can happen when you study music like that. And I think one of the things that's really cool about being in a group that's so focused on improv is, both like drawing off of that knowledge and then also like trying to actively let go of it so that you let your ear kind of lead the way through. And then you realize, oh, I guess I did just play a sub-5 chord there, or whatever. But, when improv is good, I think that, a basis in sort of jazz or theory, any kind of, musical knowledge shouldn't be the thing you're thinking about, but, kind of presents itself like in a more organic way. And by knowing it intellectually, sometimes your ear will lead you there naturally, I think.
Gotcha. Well, and you're relatively new with Ghostlight. Again, you are co-founder for Turquoise, but again, that as the pandemic and everything, all kinds of events, and right now, Ghostlight has a new album that you didn't record on, The Healing, but you guys are currently touring in the U.S. I know that you were kind of East Coast and going to be on the West Coast towards the end of the year. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, my sort of journey to join this band was sort of interesting. I mean, the band Turquoise that I started, in college and toured with for many, many years, through the course of the pandemic ended. And, without getting into all the minutia of that process, I was sort of in LA. I had just moved to LA at the first part of 22 and got a call asking if I wanted to join Ghostlight, which was a band I'd seen a bunch of times and really loved. And I was like, well, yes, I do. That's exactly what I want to do. I was sitting on the couch licking my wounds and got to jump out and get on the road with these guys. And so, this year has just been a really cool process of like integrating into a new group and into a new sort of musical style and way of doing things, which brought me back to things that sort of a heavy improv base that I used to do a lot more of when I was younger. So that's been a sort of a joy to get to rediscover my love of group improv. Yeah, and then the tours have just been great. It's getting better all the time. I mean, I think when you're taking chances the way that the band does live, the more time that you have, and the more reps you have doing that together, the more trust that's built, and then the better the music is. That process was really evident on this last tour. We're sort of at a midway point, but at the end of the first leg of this last tour, it really just felt like we were firing on all cylinders, and there was just a lot of, you could kind of like see around the corner for where everyone was trying to go with any of the improv sections. And the songs that, Tom and Raina have written are these sort of really beautiful and interesting like indie rock songs, which isn't usually it feels to me to be a unique stylistic place for the improv to sort of jump off from. And that makes for sort of untraditional, it's like, I guess it's a jam band, but a lot of the improv stuff feels a little different than your kind of up the middle traditional jam band stuff, which to me is really exciting and cool. Yeah, it's just getting better all the time, which is, that's the goal.
Well, and with a title like The Healing and coming kind of post-pandemic, is it kind of following the theme of recovery for music? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I think the lyrics are more about, interpersonal healing and, interpersonal relationships healing.
Gotcha.
You'd have to ask Tom. I'm sure there's lots of deep meanings in there. But I think that the process that everybody's going through, I mean, all my friends out on the road now, I mean, the feeling of playing a show, even though, whatever, it's been a year and a half since we were able to play at all.
Mm-hmm.
But, in this process, obviously, it's been a lot of stop and starts and stumbles. And it's like it's still such a joyful experience to get up in front of people and play. And, even shows maybe in the past that are, some shows not as well attended, or maybe there's some X, Y, and Z reason that you'd have maybe been like, that wasn't so great. It's like all of that energy is gone, and people are just, or myself at least especially, is just so thrilled to be out playing, which certainly is a cathartic healing process considering how shitty the last period of time has been.
Absolutely. Well, and I've heard from a lot of musicians that are back on the road that they get the impression from the audience that of a great amount of gratitude and excitement to be able to experience live music again, and maybe even an increased willingness to support live music, because pre-pandemic, a big thing that we were seeing was a decrease. I had a conversation with Victor Wooten, and he basically said people will pay for TV, but they want their music for free. And so they'll go to a free concert, but they're like, don't want to even pay the door anymore. And now it's kind of like, wait, we really missed music. We'll chip in a little to support it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I think the ticket sale conversation is one thing, and that's still challenging, I think, for a lot of groups, and particularly middling bands. If you're selling between 500 and 2,000 tickets, the hit you're taking, is pretty noticeable and real to the bottom line on a business level, and that's a long and complicated, conversation in terms of why that's happening and what could be done about it. But the thing that's maybe most important is that the quality of the experience that people are having when they are coming to shows is so much higher than that pre-pandemic time, where for sure there was a dip in ticket sales then too, just because you feel, I mean, truly it's amazing. You just feel people so much more engaged than ever before. For me, at least, that's been the feeling I've had without a doubt. And, you can just tell that people have been missing this experience in such a way, or not realized how much they missed it until they got there, which is almost an even better reaction to get, because you see people surprised at how much they're enjoying themselves, and that feels unbelievable. Surprise is kind of the name of the game with music in general, and that's a good one. It's a good reaction to get.
Very nice, very nice. Ian, we should talk a little bit. How are you getting your sound? What gear are you playing on?
So, I have kind of a rotating thing. I have a custom-made Maloon bass, which is this amazing builder Youngjun Park in Korea. And it's cool. So he makes his basses kind of set to the pre-CBS Fender spec, but he hand wires all of his pickups and, cuts all of his wood and everything. And so he built me this amazing, 2 P-bass setup. I have 2 P-bass pickups that he wired for me, bridge and neck. And they can either run together with the switcher, or it can run through 2 separate outputs if I want to run them through 2 separate signal chains. So, you get, different pedals, let's say track better on the bridge side or the neck side, and you can either run those and send two signals to front of house straight off the bass, or you can blend them together before going to front of house. But I typically run that through a complicated-ish switcher pedal rig into my Avalon U5, which is probably the most central piece of the tone. So, the U5 is the main thing I'm sending, and then with Ghostlight I just have a power amp in a cab that's colored by the U5 for my stage sound, with a mic on it to just add a little bit of extra grit out front for the engineer to use, but the DI sounds kind of the primary juicy tone. And then there's been a lot of trial and error over the years. Like most people, have tried all kinds of stupid, ridiculous things. But, the 2 biggest things I'd say are having a solid DI sound, and then also just having, for your clean tone, when you're using pedals, having as few points of contact between the pickup and the front plate of the DI as you possibly can. So with the switcher setup I have, when I have no pedals engaged, there's only 2 points of contact between the pickup and the front of the U5, which is A, cleans up the tone a ton, but then B, also when troubleshooting inevitably occurs, it's not like, I'm sitting here looking at 20 pedals trying to figure out what I'm doing. So, that's kind of the rig as it landed now. I mean, for me, one of the great experiences and learning experiences I had in terms of gear was my old band Turquoise got to open for Bootsy Collins on the road 2 or 3 times.
Nice.
And I got to spend a little time with his tech walking me through what was the most complicated and amazing bass rig ever. And I'll never forget one night we were playing, I think we were playing in Cincinnati maybe, or no, it was Cleveland, somewhere in Ohio, but I remember after the show, I was chatting with him. I was like, "Hey, man, will you just talk me through this thing?" Because it's he's got 3 different sets of cabinets, evenly distributed around the stage, and he's got 5 pickups with 4 outputs. So each pickup goes through a different output into a different signal chain, which is sort of one of the things that I sort of stole from this rig. But he talked me through this whole incredibly complicated setup where he's got different pedal boards for each pickup that then go to different power amps to power the different size speakers that are then set symmetrically around the stage so that each band member hears the bass the same way on the stage. I remember after this whole long thing, he's like, and the last piece of advice I have for you is never fucking do this because it breaks all the time and it's totally crazy. Which I was like, all right, so I'll take just a little piece of it. And so that's sort of been at least some of my approach with the rig, with stuff I learned.
There you go.
Very cool conversation.
There you go. Well, we had the opportunity to go into the pit with Hamilton when they were on tour, and they have a very complicated pedal board because, again, it's non-stop music, and they have a lot of different sounds. And what they've had to do is they have 2 complete pedal boards, one on standby and the other one plugged in, just because of that same thing. If something goes wrong, you just switch out the whole board. So you just go end to end, boom, new pedal board, and then worry about figuring out which of those is misbehaving later.
Right. So somebody that can do that backstage or afterward.
with time, because it does get complicated. But
totally. Well, and that's why I always tell people to having, if you can't do something as complicated as, or as expensive as having a second rig, getting a basic switcher, loop switcher pedal, that has at least a passive ability to go through. You basically have 2 1/4-inch cables that could go wrong for your clean tone.
Yeah.
So at the very least, bass will exist as the show continues, And before I figured that out, I figured it out the hard way more than once over the years, at a big show. And it's like, uh-oh, I have no idea what's wrong.
No.
This is a problem.
Totally.
So that's a cheap solution that also just, cleans up your clean tone in a great way.
Absolutely. And because you're not using so much in the way of pedals, a big part of your sound will come from your hands. So many people do. Yeah. They point that out. Do you have a preference in strings?
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing with D'Addario medium lights since I was 12 years old probably, and I just, every time I've changed them, tried a different string out in round wound strings, it's always better, worse, I don't know. I just think being comfortable with your gear, I think it's something a lot of people talk about, but it's more than what it is. It's your comfortability with it is what allows you to have your tone come out. So if your tone's in your hands, the only way for that to happen is for you to know, have a comfortability relationship with what you're using. And in so many ways, it matters so much more than how expensive or new or technologically advanced something is.
Yeah.
Well,
and are you getting much time out of your strings too? Because that's another issue, especially when you're touring.
Yeah, so in Turquoise I used a lot of pedals, and so because of that, I would actually change my strings almost every other show, just because what I wanted to do was take the variables out of pedal response. So when you set all your pedals right, as the string dies over time, particularly envelopes and fuzz pedals will react really differently, and the overtones come out really differently. And so at that point, what I devised with our front of house guy was, I was fortunate enough to have a deal with Diodario, so I'd buy 30 packs of strings going into a tour, and I would just change them every other night, and that way I could leave pedals set the same way and not have to spend sound check, kind of like whatever re kind of calibrating where the pedals all needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that's really cool with Ghostlight, and I still play with a decent amount of pedals, although less for sure with Ghostlight. But one of the things that's so great about the spirit of the band is that the idea of variation night to night is like a really embraced concept. So whether that's in the form of a song or in an improv section, obviously, the idea that something doesn't sound the same on a given night is a blessing, not something to be avoided.
Gotcha.
And so in terms of the strings, there's obviously more dead strings can sound very cool. So I was doing a little less of that. I was changing them maybe once every, 5 or 6 shows.
Gotcha.
But for me, the sweet spot's usually like the second show on a set of strings.
I understand. Well, and unless you're playing reggae where you want them to be dead and just leave them that way, you're getting more out of them.
At home, I have my Tomastics on my old jazz bass that feel great when you use old flat wounds that just rock,
Yeah, and I find that flat wounds, it seems that the older, just the happier they seem to be. But
yeah, I have an old funny story. I was in Cleveland too, 2 Cleveland stories. But we went to a Sam Ash in Cleveland, and they had this old JS2 Guild bass that was kind of like their their SG bass at the time. That was pretty short run, limited edition bass. I looked at it, I was like, man, what's the deal with that thing? And it was sort of beat up and in the corner, and the guy told me that it had been repurposed at an auction because the owner had gone to jail, and the bass was found in the basement, like covered in bird seed, apparently. So I bought this bass, and the guy told me that the one thing they knew about it is that the strings were the original 1972 flat wound strings that were sold with the bass. And that thing, it's such a cool instrument, but the strings are, assuming that's a true story, they certainly feel like they're from the 70s.
There you go.
It's got like wood saddles. It sounds super cool. But yeah, every time I pick that bass up, I'm like, all right, these strings could be 50 years old.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, and as we look ahead, what plans are there for the future?
I think everybody's kind of getting things back together, and my life certainly changed a lot with Turquoise ending. But, Ghostlight is raring to go, and these tours have been amazing. So, I'm hopeful for spring tour, summer festivals, and all the like. I just personally, I moved to LA about 5 months ago, and have a bunch of friends that I'm looking forward to making music with there, people I've known from growing up and from college times. I actually spent this past weekend, it was really fun. A couple friends of mine from Berkeley, we had a band called The Tales that we did for a few years, and we went into the studio for like the last 3 days, I guess, until yesterday, putting down a bunch of songs that we'd written like 15 years ago and never recorded. It was just personally a fun, cathartic experience. And it was cool to see songs kind of come to life that have been dormant for so long. And you're like, I guess when you write a song, it stays forever.
Nice.
It's kind of a cool feeling. So that's, doing stuff like that is just trying to kind of find new ways to play. With Turquoise, we were on the road in some years almost 180, 200 days a year. So it was a really full-time thing. Mm-hmm. And my schedule is now a bit more open. So I'm finding myself kind of looking at like, all right, well, the next Ghostlight dates are a few months out. What am I going to fill my time with?
Sure.
I'm just doing stuff locally and maybe doing a little teaching. I've always loved teaching. And so kind of starting to think about doing a little bit of that and kind of seeing where things take me. It's the best part about being a musician is opportunities do seem to come up out of the blue, and that's always a fun feeling when your phone rings or something happens and all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah. I want to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and if people want to stay on top of what you're doing, the best place to look, I know you're on Instagram.
Tay-Bones Bass Warrior.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's, my dad used to call me Tay-Bones, so everyone, my good friend, when I made Instagram many years ago, made my Instagram account, I was like, I think you should use that.
There you go.
So it's stuck. Yeah, that's the best place. That's where I put all the stuff I'm doing.
Gotcha.
Is through there, Yeah, that and Ghostlight's website for sure.
Gotcha. I'll make sure I include that. Well, Taylor, it's great getting caught up. Folks, you've seen him here
right
on Days Musician Magazine, Taylor Shell.
Right on. Thank you for listening, everybody, and, enjoy yourselves out there.
Got it.